Good morning, Conscious Warriors from beautiful Brisbane, Australia. It's great to be here with you. It's Friday down under and it's happy Thanksgiving to everyone overseas. I hope you're eating a beautiful piece of pumpkin pie for me. And I'm sorry if you don't like it, but I've had a taste of American pumpkin pie and it's delicious. We don't have the tins that you can get over there, so make sure you have a piece for me. And when I land in America, at some point in time, I'll be eating copious quantities of pumpkin pie because it is delicious. This morning, I want to share with you some very, very special information around childhood emotional neglect. Now, yesterday we watched the still face experiment video, and I will put it on again this morning for everybody who missed it because it's only brief. But it's very, very important that we understand with childhood emotional neglect, it's something we can't see, it's something we don't feel, and it's basically invisible. So in order to work with it, we need language, we need education, and we need to be able to start observing where it's happening in our day-to-day life. Now, I bought this book, Running on Empty by Jonas Webb, Ptsd. Now, but the information that I was able to get came from Google, okay? Now, this book is good for the many, many different varieties of what childhood emotional neglect looks like, because it can seem like we have a functioning family, yet childhood emotional neglect is actually going on. So there's no emotional validation from parents about what the child is experiencing. Okay, so what we've experienced. There's no emotional language education. There's no, not just validation, but there's no communication about emotions. So for us, certainly in our family, there's been multiple generations without emotional language, without emotional communication and emotional validation. So it takes a considerable amount more work to be a conscious warrior and say, right, I need to be the generation that changes this. So for me, as my kids grew up, I help them identify their emotions. That's the first place to start, because then it helped me identify mine as well. These days you can Google emotional wheel and you can actually print out ones that are for kids. You can print out one for yourself as an adult, and you can stick them up on the fridge and use them every single day, especially if you get stuck, okay, and you haven't quite got the word that's fits for how you're feeling. It's a really good thing to be doing for yourself and with your kids as well. Let me just grab the infographic, which I've put together a page about emotional neglect based on what it is from this book. Hi Leslie, and you've just bought the book too. Yeah, it's really good for going through what it looks like, because it looks different in each household, and to gain that greater understanding for each individual, especially when we work in the area as well, and even as a nurse, to actually be able to see what's happening for people, because it does look different for everybody, is very, very valid and important work. So I will put this infographic, it's A4 size, up. So what does emotional neglect look like, or what is it and what does it look like? So emotional neglect is a parent's failure to respond enough to a child's emotional needs. So the parent has to actually be able to see them to respond, but the parent's not actually seeing them. Emotional neglect is, in some ways, the opposite of mistreatment and abuse. So whereas mistreatment and abuse are parental acts, Emotional neglect is a parent's failure to act. It's a failure to notice, attend to, or respond appropriately to a child's feelings. Now, if we don't do that as parents, then how is our child going to know what's happening for them internally, understand it, know how to move through the process of stress and emotional regulation or regaining emotional regulation? They're not. And it causes problems later in life, but we'll get to that. Now, emotional neglect is an act of omission. It's not visible, noticeable, or memorable. So we don't actually remember it not happening, if that makes sense, because we grow up thinking it's normal. Emotional neglect is the white space in the family picture, the background rather than the foreground. It is insidious and overlooked while it does its silent damage to people's lives. Now, when I use the word insidious for depression because it just creeps on, and emotional neglect is the same. It's very, very subtle. So it behooves us, for want of a better word right now, to pay attention to what is happening internally. We may have difficulty knowing and trusting our own emotions as adults. Now, when you combine childhood emotional neglect with the acts that are obvious, the physical, emotional, and sexual abuse that impacts the trauma, then we've really got a melting pot of not only the parent acting by omission, but also the parent acting. Why is it Friday and my words have just gone straight out the window? So the parents acting by omission and the parents actually acting out as well, doing physical, emotional and sexual abuse, plus all the others. We may have difficulty knowing and trusting who we are, like who am I? Because with trauma too, we fail to develop our sense of self, all right? And that's definitely a part in our brain that we need. We may have difficulty understanding our own feelings as well as other people's feelings. And that's really valid as adults, that sometimes we can see that people are feeling, but we may not know why or understand what's happening for them. But with childhood trauma, we actually go about observing people and we begin to know their language, their body language, their internal language so deeply that as adults we can begin to assume that we know people, and we really need to take a step back and say, right, let's just ask some questions here. Okay? Because an important part of ourselves, our emotional self, has been denied, we may find ourselves feeling disconnected, unfulfilled, or empty. For some of us, we feel like we've got a hole in the middle of us that absolutely hurts like crazy and we can't fill it. We may have difficulty trusting or relying upon others, and I could say that everybody in the room would probably put their hands up and say, how often do we ask somebody for help? It's something that we have to learn to do as adults. Learn that it's okay to ask for help, learn to use our voice to ask for help, and learn that we're safe to go about this process. And it takes practice, but we can do it. We may be feeling we are different from other people, like something is wrong with us, but we can't put our finger on it. Or we can't put our finger on what it is. And I know for me, I certainly ran around for a lot of years going, there's something wrong, but I can't put my finger on it. And it was a process of unpacking not just childhood emotional neglect, but also other different factors of myself personally. When parents fail to give children structure and rules to live by, like consequences and discipline, as adults, they will struggle with self-discipline. So they will struggle to have it, they will struggle to put structure into their day-to-day life. And whether people like it or not, our brain needs it. Our brain thrives on structure and goals. And our brain is so powerful that when we set ourselves up So one thing I do is set myself up the night before for the next day. And when I do that, because our brain is so powerful and goal-orientated, I actually am able to get up and go, right, this, and this. It's all in an order. So we can have the self-discipline, but we also need to put structure and strategies into place. When we are emotionally neglected, we have no childhood memories to explain our difficulties. So too often we blame ourselves, okay? Because remember, it's like we can't see it. We can't feel it unless we know it's there and we start doing the work. Emotional neglect has been overlooked because it's invisible, unmemorable, and it is the absence of something. So it's the absence of emotional validation. Now, this impacts our ability, our attachment. Now, attachment, there I've read lots and lots of stuff about attachment, and also as the mother, our primary connection initially is with our mum. But what I've started seeing is that there are a lot of men around me who are struggling with mental health challenges, and I know, because I know of a number of them personally, the struggle has come from their lack of relationship with their father, so lack of validation emotionally from their dad. So what I did was I went, well, then if that's the case, then it must look different for men than it does for women. So I got on Google and went, asked the question, what does childhood emotional neglect look like for men and women? And I actually found a table, and it is different. So the outcomes are different. So what we would work with or work towards overcoming or breaking free from as an adult, as a female, is different to a male. And I'm just going to grab the chart off my desktop here for you. Now, hopefully, okay, so this will be up, and I will put this up under the video as well. So if you look at this, as women, we attempt to fill ourselves with other people and their needs. And if I said to you, how many of us online today go and do everything for everyone else before we do anything for ourselves, we'd all be going, that'd be me. Counterdependence. So as women, we seek to fill others' needs in place of our own. So we haven't, and this is because we haven't yet learnt to identify our needs. We have harsh judgments that drive down our self-esteem, and the way to turn that around is start believing the people around you that you're a wonderful person, you're very kind and very caring, and take it on board that you are this person indeed. So it doesn't work to believe all the, inner critic stuff about ourselves, so start believing the opposite. We feel unlikable or unlovable. And that's something that you can work on as well. Start believing the kind things that other people say about you. And even if you start off with the little things, you can build it into the big things. And remember, we need this because neurologically we're developing our sense of self that wasn't developed in our childhood. And as women, we may learn the language of emotion, but it's hard to apply it to ourselves. And we can do that. We can learn this, and we can learn to take it on board individually as well. For women, anger is directed at ourselves and may turn into depression. I have a real challenge around this personally, because when we've experienced trauma in our childhood, no matter what that trauma is, we can develop a depression trigger in our brain. So it's not about depression, about us turning emotion in on ourselves. It's actually a trigger that happens in our brain that produces a chemical reaction and shuts us down, etc., etc. Now, if you have repressed anger and it does turn into depression, I understand that too. But I want us to be aware that when we've got trauma, that there is actually a trigger in our brain that goes off just out of nowhere, just like the anxiety trigger can, okay? And we can do work around that to make sure we can break free of it. Now for guys, they seek adventure to feel something or isolate themselves. And I know a lot of men that are starting to isolate themselves. Men fervently embrace and pride themselves on independence and competence, okay? And the way to counteract that is get involved in community, right? And getting back into learning about how to have a social life as well, because often our social skills lack. Men or women, our social skills weren't developed, and this can come because of childhood emotional neglect as well. For men, harsh judgments become pressure to be the best, often at work, and may become driven. So if you're a guy and you're spending most of your life being focused on being driven and getting stuff done, you have to literally teach yourself to slow down and smell the roses and then give your wife a bunch. Nah, kid, it's Friday. But give her a bunch of roses, or her favourite flower actually. But for you, sit down and do something that you enjoy, that you can just chill and involve other people as well. It doesn't have to be a lot of people, just a mate or a friend or a spouse, partner, anyone, and share the time with them, because it's really good to communicate and turn things around. For men, they can feel invisible and overlooked. And for all the women out there, make it a point today to see a guy and you don't say, I see you, but just let them know you see them by saying g'day and how are you today? Ask them how they are. And for a guy, that's a big thing, because they're feeling overlooked. And I see it all around me. And it's nice for them to know they're not invisible, that they are seen. Pardon me. And for both sexes, our driving need is to be fully known and fully accepted. So it's nice when somebody goes out of their way to ask how you are. For a guy, they may become overly or compulsively self-disciplined at times, okay? And all of these things help them ignore that they have emotional needs that they don't know they have, and that they need language for, and it needs to be addressed. For a guy, their emotions go underground and come out as irritability, and haven't we all seen that when we've come out of unhealthy marriages? Because the men, certainly in my generation back, were not taught emotional language, were not taught, their emotions weren't validated. And I don't know about other countries, but certainly in Australia there's a big, get over it, suck it up, put your big girl panties on, and so on, all that kind of language, rather than let's sit down and let, you tell me how you feel, what's happening for you, and I'm here to listen. I'm not here to solve it. I'm just here to listen so that you can process it. And it's a really, really powerful thing to do, to listen to somebody and let them process their emotions, and don't offer any solutions. And for men, anger is more likely to also be turned outward at others. So if you are getting angry at other people, sit down and ask yourself the question, what is it I'm trying to put language around? What emotions am I feeling? Do I have the language for them? Or do I need to seek out more information to put language around what's happening for me? Okay? All right, I'm just going to show you the still face experiment again, because it's very vital that we understand how non-verbal this can be, okay? Because when it's non-verbal and we can't see it, we tend to not know that it's there. And I want you to understand that it is there, and it is something that's really, really important for us to be able to look at and recover from.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age.
Are you my good girl? Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
Okay. That is so powerful when we understand how non-verbal it is and the stress that we will have been under repeatedly year after year in our day-to-day life, and the impact that it has internally for us. So this is why we need to do this work, in order that we can get back to who I am and why I'm here. What's my plan? What's my purpose? And we unpack it. Now, for me, I had a milestone yesterday where I finally broke free from the thought processes that put everybody else first, and I realized that this life is about me. Now, from a heart perspective. Now, when it's about me from a heart perspective, it means that I'm going to be so focused on my plan and purpose, because it's here to serve other people in my way, that it doesn't ever negate anybody else. But until my heart got down to that stage where I went, this is about me and what I'm here to do, where I'm going, and that automatically serves other people. I was continually putting other people first, and I didn't get to my dream. But our plan and purpose, when we're putting it in place, automatically helps and serves other people. And Leslie, you're right. Every time I watch it, it makes me feel like crying as well. And yeah, and absolutely, same with me. I know my mum was struggling with her own childhood trauma, and I know that her mother was, and her mother was. All on the maternal side of my family, the abandonment trauma is there. My great-grandmother left 4 girls in the middle of nowhere and just took off. So imagine how hard that was. They're in the middle of nowhere, like country, and no one around. 4 young girls. Oh, that just makes me want to cry. Anyhow, and then they all got split up from their family. And then on and on it goes. And my grandmother, so both my grandmothers were abandoned. Okay, so my paternal grandmother, her mother had to put her in an orphanage in a paid position because she was a single mum, because her father was a drunk who obviously took off somewhere. And so my grandmother, she would never talk about emotions, never. And that's a whole other chat show we can have another day. But it is very, very challenging stuff. But it is possible for us to break free from this and to get down into that space where we're living our plan and purpose. Yeah, my mum did too, Leslie. Absolutely, my mum died before I could tell her I understood. But I tried in different ways throughout the years. That's all I can say. I tried in different ways, but our mums didn't know how to receive that either. And yeah, I often wonder what would have happened if she lived as I went through this whole journey. But at the end of the day, I'm better off focusing on what's here right now. And I miss her greatly. Thanks, Fiona, and thanks for joining in from Scotland as well. Our mum, for women, our mum is such a powerful figure, and what's been handed down for generations. We're the generation that's changing everything. And I think that we are amazing individuals who are coming together and creating a whole change that the generations will look back and go, thank goodness they started. Okay, have the most gorgeous Thanksgiving, everybody overseas. It's Friday here, so I get the weekend off, and I will see you again Monday morning. If you have any questions, please leave them down below. Remember to hit like and replay if you're here for the replay. And I will put all the information up on the Facebook page. And if you're here on the YouTube channel, hit subscribe to know when the latest video is out. And if you're on Facebook, you can hit notifications to know when I go live. And I really appreciate you all joining in. You're a blessing, and you're a blessing all around the world for the silent majority. Have a great day, guys. Bye for now.